Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another riveting episode of If Margaritas Could Talk, the Over 40 Chronicles podcast. I am your host, Tracy Black, and joining me today is my special guest, Lisamarie Pietragallo, who is a nurse practitioner and founder of Optimal Health and Wellbeing. And today we are talking about all things intimacy and bedroom-related sexy time for those over 40. So grab a margarita or your beverage of choice and let's get comfortable. I wanted to welcome you, Lisa, to the podcast. How are you?
Thank you. I'm great today. Happy to be here and talk about all this fun stuff because just because we get older, intimacy and sexuality are always there.
Are always there. They don't go away. That's
never
for sure.
Go away.
So to kick off today, Lisa, maybe just give our listeners a little bit of a brief overview of who you are and your expertise in, what we're talking about today with the sexy health over 40.
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm well over 40 and a woman myself. So that counts for a lot, I think. But I have been a registered nurse for 30 plus years and a nurse practitioner. I have a PhD in holistic nutrition, and I have a functional medicine and an integrative functional medicine practice. Functional medicine is all about starting with lifestyle and the things that we can do to stay healthy, because I find a lot in my practice that we lose ourselves with kids and relationships and life, and we're so busy being the caregiver and taking care of everyone else and making sure everyone else has what they need and gets to where they need to be and to the doctor's appointments and eats right. And we kind of forget that we need to take care of ourselves. The saying, put your oxygen mask on first, we forget. And to the point of today's conversation, I think relationships change over the years. You put everything first and you kind of put your relationship on the back burner until the kids get older. And all of a sudden the kids get older and you're thinking, who are we and what are we doing here?
I think no one prepares you. And I don't know if your parents did. I know mine didn't ever say, this is what you get to look forward to when you hit this specific age. And you go, okay. Nobody said that. That conversation did not happen. So you're out here in the wilderness, just fighting off the stuff, trying to figure out who am I now that I'm 40, 50, 60, 70, and my things are changing. I think one of the first questions I did want to ask you was circling back to why we're here today is intimacy and sexual health. And I want to know why it's still so important as we're aging.
Absolutely. Again, like I said in the beginning, it doesn't go away, but we are sexual beings. And just because we get older or things change does not mean we don't have desires. And when I say desires, I don't necessarily mean physical desires, but just the connection, the intimacy, because intimacy, in my opinion, and in the science, is so much more than a physical relationship. It's emotional. And it's the connection. That's why socialization is so important. And as we get older, that's one of the number one things for cognitive decline as we get older.
That makes perfect sense. That is the reality as we're getting older of losing people. You realize that dynamic shift changes. And, the connection with people is really important. I think in learning, as I'm getting older, what's the best way to put it? Maintaining friendships and maintaining our self-awareness and intimacy and sexual health are really just as important, like the question I asked you. But it's so much bigger than just that. And I think people think that it's just this specific thing. Now, obviously, we're here today to talk about mainly the intimacy and sexual health, because I think there's a lot of people where it's sort of like the older you get, maybe it becomes a little bit more passé where it's not a thing anymore. But out in the world, it's actually more so. So when we're talking about how can individuals and couples maintain a fulfilling sex life as they get older? So let's talk about that for a sec.
Yes. So going back to prioritizing the relationship of started out the two of you, then you have kids and business and life and whatever happens, we just have to maintain that we're the priority. Make time for yourself. It's so easy to fall into the mundane, the day-to-day. So even just doing things spontaneously if you can, and scheduling in, this is on the opposite end of spontaneity, but don't get caught up in the struggle of, oh, there's no time to do anything. Because I think we all know that there's always time to do what's a priority. So make yourselves a priority and schedule time into the busy days for, a date night, even an hour, even 30 minutes at lunchtime. Sit and hold hands while you're watching TV, because that physical touch increases the oxytocin, the serotonin, and those little actions start to build that emotional connection or rebuild that emotional connection. I think a lot of us lose that because so many things get in the way.
I agree. Okay, we're getting older. Yes, it's inevitable. However, the mindset, even though you might be older in an age number, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're older in your mindset of how you think and respond to those connections with your partner. So that word always brings up little things in my mind. I'm getting older and maybe it's passé or maybe it's faux pas that you shouldn't be doing specific things when you get older. I disagree with that altogether. Maintenance of a relationship in connection.
Yeah.
Like you said, it can be the smallest and simplest things. And sometimes when there's other parts that have changed or we as human beings, again, everybody has a different way that they connect with their partner. And sometimes even if you've been married for 30, 40 years, maybe some of that young spark is gone, but you can still maintain some of the little sparks. It's considered part of it, right?
I agree. And make new sparks, play, have fun. And I mean that by just being silly, being goofy, have the inner kid in you. To that point, even play games. Gin. My husband and I have had a gin game going for, I think, 13 years. It's pretty funny. It's not really intimate, but it's just that playfulness that, in my opinion, supports that intimacy because you're spending time together. You can do so many things together. I think we forget that friendship you had that started the connection to begin with, however many years ago. And we need to find that connection and remember what started it.
When you're coming out the gate and you're young, it's funny because you pull all the stops. You're trying to land that partner. You're putting your best foot forward and you're dressing your finest and you're looking your finest and things are coiffed and things are escaped and you're creating and setting that environment. So what do you think happens? What are some of the common physical changes that impact intimacy after the age of 50 for both men and women? I think that's important to a lot of our listeners just to understand. Perhaps maybe they're going through something and they want to know if it's normal or not, right?
Yes. And it's never one thing. As with everything, and I say this all the time in functional medicine, everything is related. Everything is tied together. So when we're looking at physical conditions, and I don't even want to say necessarily as we age, because with our society and with disease, obesity, chronic illnesses that have become so prevalent in the last 10 years, I am hearing this is a problem even in the 30s. So it's not necessarily aging. We can reverse our age a little bit if you stay healthy, stay active. But the physical changes, obviously, with hormonal changes in menopause, estrogen goes down, progesterone goes down. Progesterone is our happy hormone. It calms anxiety. It helps us sleep. It's the feel-good hormone. So that's the first one that starts to get lower in our late 30s. If you just look at what that one hormone will do, if you're not sleeping, you're a little cranky. If you're anxious and always on edge, you're not going to be in a really sexy mood, right? And then throw on top of that your daily stressors. And I literally had a patient tell me one day that she said, my husband said something to me while we were eating dinner, and it took everything I had in me not to stab him in the cheek with my fork. And she said it kind of teasingly, of course. I mean, I've been there, that anxiety. Sometimes you just want to say, oh, enough. And that's only one hormone. So throw on top of that, we've got vaginal dryness. It becomes very painful when you don't have the lubrication that you need. And throw on top of that, the testosterone starts to decrease. Penetration becomes a little more difficult. This is why it's so important to recognize where you are. There are things that can be done. There are lots of things that can be done to help these issues. But if for whatever reason, you can't, then you have to find a workaround. This is where we go back to physical intimacy is only a part of the relationship and true intimacy. To your point about kind of what changes, I think it deepens the relationship on an emotional level. When we were young, you had that lust, right? We had that one level. It wasn't deep. It was just physical. And then, you build a life with someone and we just build, the layers just build and build and build. And if you're lucky enough, that is what becomes more important. That level of intimacy. This is the most vulnerable you can ever be with someone, figuratively and literally, no clothes on, right? In a physical relationship. And that is total vulnerability. But exposing your soul and what you feel is a much deeper vulnerability. The two play so importantly. If you can do the dance right, both strengthen. And even if the physical time starts to lower, as you get older, the emotional intimacy grows, the physical intimacy might get a little slower, but that connection is still there. So
I think oftentimes there's not like a hard set fast rule on these things. I think it's adaptation. And that's the key component of it, is adapting as we're aging, adapting as we're growing, and finding new ways to bring that back to the surface. Because it's so easy. And it is so easy to say, I'm tired, I'm not feeling good, my back aches, my leg aches, my hip ache. But you throw physical things in there, physical ailments, and of course it's going to change those types of moments when you lose a little bit of that connection. And I think even from this perspective of men, is there still this expectation? I think curiosity for a lot of women, is there this sexual performance expectation from men that they expect that after the age of 50, 60, 70? Is that still a thing?
Are you ready to add a little sparkle to your life? Let me introduce you to Kindred Fusion, the ultimate destination for permanent jewelry. That's right, no more worrying about clasps or losing your favorite pieces. With Kindred Fusion, you can enjoy beautiful, seamless jewelry that is as unique as you are. Imagine a stunning bracelet or necklace that feels like a second skin. Sounds amazing, right? At kindredfusion.com, you can explore a gorgeous selection of styles that fit every personality and occasion. So head on over to kindredfusion.com today and discover the magic of permanent jewelry.
That's a really good point. And I think it's funny because one of my last positions as a nurse practitioner, I worked in nursing homes. I did geriatric psychiatry. And that you spend a little time in a nursing home and it is very evident that sexuality never fades, ever. It's an innate, it is there. It's the last thing that men and women are thinking about, even if they're not in their right mind. It's really kind of fascinating when you look at it that way. So to your point, I think, and men and women, just because you may not be able to physically perform at the level you want that emotional connection and you still have the desire and the drive. That doesn't go away. We only touched on hormone issues. We didn't even talk about, as we get older, high blood pressure, cardiovascular diseases, arthritis. I mean, just think of the logistics physically. So all of that comes into play. You have to recognize the communication is key, because you have to have that relationship to be able to say, okay, you know what? I'm not there with you, and let's see how we can get it back there. But it's not going to be the same as it was when we were 20 for this reason, and this reason. And then medications also contribute to erectile dysfunction, poor libido, and all of that. So there are so many aspects that play a very crucial role in sexuality.
When there are changes, the word changes is at the forefront of all of this, that things are changing. Our bodies are changing. Our minds are changing. We're continually evolving. Now, I know for a lot of women, now guys out there that are listening, we're not leaving you out. It's just this has to come up because it's important. We have to talk about menopause. We have to talk about those hormonal changes and how they do affect sexual desire and function. I know for speaking for myself, I mean, I'm postmenopause. It's coming on 7 years for me. And so much has changed in 7 years, so much gone through breast cancer. Yeah. Hysterectomy, all the things, there's this level of desire that seems to have now changed drastically. I'd be lying if I said, hey, I'd much rather just Netflix and really just chill instead of like Netflix and real chill. I just want to chill. I want the popcorn. Whatever. Yeah. And without there being this like pressure for having to do things, because things have changed so much for my body. So from a female perspective, there's so many women who go, I don't know how to navigate this. And is this normal when hormonal changes affects that desire and the function? Can you kind of delve a little bit more depth about that? So
now again, it's not appropriate for everyone, but bioidentical hormone replacement is so helpful. And it's helpful when I do this in my practice, I talk about it twofold. One is we can do it for symptom relief, but there's a whole other aspect of doing it for healthy living and healthy aging. Because if you work with the hormones to get them to optimal levels, then there's cognitive improvement, there's strength, bone health, all of that thing. Now, clearly, we all know that there's some people that either choose not to do that or can't do it for other reasons. So, you're always, again, going to pivot. You're always navigating what's right for you and things like that. But to your point, it's not just women. Men go through andropause. So their hormones also drop. We've got this stigma that aging is not a good thing. We lose everything when we get older. We're parents, we're grandparents. Parents and grandparents, you don't want to think about them having sex. You don't want to think about that. So that's kind of the stigma also that's out there. I'm finding that, again, this is not an age necessarily issue. I think it's more a health issue, and there are things that can be done. There are foods you can eat to help balance hormones and to decrease inflammation. So there are lots of different ways to look at this. It's so nice because you get that comfort feeling. It's like, hey, honey, let's just go sit down. What movie do you want to watch tonight? All the hormones involved in the oxytocin that we talked about, the serotonin, those actually are set loose by physical attraction, physical touch. And it doesn't necessarily have to be intercourse. It's just the hand holding. Kiss lasting 3 seconds, a hug lasting 6 seconds. That duration releases oxytocin. So if you're going for that physical intimacy, this is why oxytocin release is why we bond with babies, with newborn babies, getting that skin to skin connection. And it's no different. So even just sitting there, Netflixing, holding hands, eating popcorn together, having a little conversation, that is literally the first step to rebuild things.
Do you think that individuals, from a practice perspective, all the clients that you see on a daily basis, Is there a lot of conversation around how the mindset shifts and maybe there's a little bit of disinterest in being physically connected? Even when you're 50, the changes from 40 to 50, unless you're a rock hard bodybuilder, things shift and change. There's squishy parts, things start to loosen, skin's a little looser, wrinkles are now prevalent. Body image and self-confidence affect those things. So when you're trying to connect with your partner and you're dealing with the menopause as a woman, and then you're dealing with other things as a man, like the body image aspect of things, how do you not look at yourself and go, like, is this attractive? Because you looked one way when you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, and now it's changing. And you go, that wasn't there before. What's happening? Can you delve a little deeper into how those things affect it?
100%. It always comes back to us and how we feel about ourselves, because we project our self-image to everyone in the world, right? We look in the mirror and you think, what happened to me? This is not me. Especially, when you see people that, you went to high school with and you think, oh my gosh, I hardly recognize them. They didn't age well. And then I think, wait a minute, do I look younger in my own mind than I do to someone else? It always comes back to how you feel, what your self-image is. The old saying, you are what you eat. I always start with food as medicine. So fueling your body, I will tell you, that is the quickest thing that you can do to start to feel better. Because when you feel better physically, it comes through in your confidence. 90% of our serotonin, which is our another happy hormone, the feel-good hormone, it's made in our gut. And with all the non-food items that are in our food, all the highly processed foods that we eat, convenience, fast food, all of that stuff, our guts are a mess. When you start fueling your body with healthier food, you don't initially notice a change in the mirror or on the scale, but you really start to feel better and your mood starts to get better. Once that happens, you look at yourself a little bit differently. You're not as critical. That to me is the number one place for us all to start feeling better.
Food can also be a part of the playfulness, which we tend to forget. So You think about that intimacy. You're trying to increase your own inner health, your body, all the core things that you need to do in order to make sure that your blood pressure is lower. There's this instantaneous, let's go to the doctor when something's wrong, because we see the signs of it. Nobody goes to the doctor when they're, I don't know how to deal with my intimacy issues with my partner. These things are happening and I don't know how to bring it up, or I don't know how to talk about it. Whenever we're sick, you have the flu, you have a cold, you take medicine, you do all these things, you go to the hospital, you go to the doctor. If you have a body injury, you go to the doctor, you go to the hospital. If you have ailment and it's like, okay, we're going to do blood, there's always a solution, but nobody talks about what are some of the fixes for these real, true, honest, raw emotions around losing the ability to connect in that way with your partner, losing the ability physically to feel like things that might be preventing you from being able to be intimate with your partner. Like a back injury, I had nothing but fear in my brain that I'm going to move the wrong way one time and I'm going to be back in the hospital and having a third spine surgery. There's fear set around some of the physical ones. It was a couple of years ago. I had watched Gwyneth Paltrow has a show on Netflix. It's a series called Goop Lab. And surprisingly enough, there was a whole episode in there. I think it's episode 3 that talks about intimacy. And as we're getting older, how we have to adapt with all of our physical changes and sometimes those limitations. And if we look at ourselves in the mirror naked, and then we have a different viewpoint because we remember how we used to look. So we go back to that everything used to be firm and tight, and then here we are and now it's different. And then you go, that impacts your mental capacity to be able to connect on that level.
Yes.
So when we are strategizing for improving these emotional connections and intimacy from a long-term perspective, is there a number one thing that you tell your patients? I want to eliminate just the food component of it, but I want to talk about the mental connection to that, to your body and the mental connection.
Yes. And that all comes down to communication. Everything is connected. So if you don't have that communication, you're not going to know what your partner wants or needs, or you need to let your partner know how you're feeling. Because again, with everything health related as we age, I mean, what about the person who just had a heart attack and can't exert themselves? Longer relationships are just built on that trust factor, because going back to the emotional intimacy over the physical intimacy, if the physical intimacy is very important to both of you, then you find a workaround. There are other things to do, but unless you have that conversation, we need to normalize the conversation and normalize the aspect of saying, I'm not as young as I used to be. I still have desires. I'm not quite sure how we're both going to get there. So what are some options? And asking the questions and having the open, honest conversations and not being judgmental at all and looking at a problem, but finding the workaround. None of this is going to happen.
You have a relationship and you can make all the decisions in life. We're going to live here. We're going to buy a house here. We're going to have this many kids. But a lot of people have this inability to connect on a sexy level and they don't know how to communicate with their partner on that. The other thing is, before people have life throws at you different things. Maybe intimacy was better with that previous partner, but then you're with this new partner for a multitude of different reasons that, you felt was a better decision making. Maybe it's not as good as it was with that other person. But when you're younger, like you said earlier, everything is lust. There's a different drive to that physical connection comparatively to when you're older. And I sit back and I think to myself, I don't ever remember my grandparents being really touchy-feely. It seemed like the odd time you'd see them hug or maybe give a kiss on the cheek or something, but it was never like PDA. It's not like that. Our generation is a little bit different. Even the baby boomers, again, a different generation. There's some people that are really, really very open, very sexual, have a really healthy relationship. And then there's some people who just don't. And it fizzed off years and years and years ago. And you go, is it capable to get that back? Or do you just accept that it doesn't exist anymore and carry on? Is it out of fear? Is it rejection? Like there's so many things I think that goes through all of our minds. Even if you were married for so many years and your partner has passed on and now you're back re-entering into the dating life and the dating scene as an little bit older version of yourself, what advice do you have for those people that are kind of re-entering that dating scene and that in the precipice, it sits at the back of your mind going, oh God, what's it going to be like to be with someone new, right?
You brought up so many good points. I want to touch on a lot of them.
Yeah.
Going to the doctor and a woman might say sex is painful. The answer that they're going to get is, well, that's just part of aging because, they don't have time to deal with that. They don't really know how to deal with that. And men are being written a prescription for Cialis or Viagra. That's what's happening in that office. Even when you look at therapists, which of course, therapy, I'm a huge fan because we all need help at some point, but they stress communication, which is exactly what we're talking about here. And my grandparents were in arranged marriage. I want to say business-like. I'll do this, you do that, and that was it. So luckily now it seems our generation, we marry who we want to based on how we feel about them. So I always maintain, unless you're in some kind of an abusive relationship, physically, emotionally, usually you can get back to that common ground with that person through communication. Because if that spark was there, you can get that back through fun, playing. I mean, just experiences, especially at our ages. This should be the best time of your life where you and your partner are back doing fun things, traveling, going to, weekend retreats. All of these things are based on sharing and enjoying a common bond. That is always the most important. And then piling on touch and holding hands and just that loving, endearing thing. Now to your point of you have a loved one, a husband, you may have had an amazing relationship and he passed on or she passed on. we don't want to be alone. We want that connection. You can have grief, but you can still experience joy in this new relationship that you have. And you don't have to feel guilty or like you're abandoning the memory of that loved one, because you're allowed to experience joy and have that relationship. But as a healthcare professional, the incidence of STDs in the older population is skyrocketing.
Wow.
So it's really, really important that, and it might be a little embarrassing that you think, oh, I'm in my 50s or 60s. I'm not going to talk to this new person I want to date who's been married for how many years. You hope that their intentions were true and that, they only had one partner, but you don't know. So you really do need to have that conversation and say, okay, well, we should probably both be tested just to make sure. And I don't think enough healthcare providers for certain aren't talking about that.
Yes.
So
a friend of mine, we actually just had this exact conversation about the importance of when you're starting out in a new relationship. Even if you're in your 40s, you're still starting out in a new relationship. So I'm 55. I still feel like I'm in my 40s. I look kind of like, with the few exception of the wrinkles and stuff. But in my mind, I think I'm still in my 40s. When you're trying to jump into something, maybe not jump into, maybe not leap into, but you're trying to explore new possibilities in your life. Those are really, really still big things, no matter what age you are. It isn't just for young people.
Exactly.
You have to look after your own intimate health, your own personal hygiene. These are all really big things. But personal hygiene is part of it too. Making sure that, you're still situationally aware of your body and fluids. You still got to take care of yourself. And I think those are part of that intimacy component as well. And having conversations if something's, maybe not right or whatever. And, trusting the journey with that. Maybe just because I'm older now, I'm not attractive to someone, somebody else because I'm getting older. And there's this, like, how does it work when you hit your 60s, 70s, and then you see men that are with much, much, much younger women? And not only that, but sometimes there's women with much, much younger men. I've always been curious about where a person's mind goes to with that. And is it more of an intimacy thing because, okay, I had that, but now I want this. And my mind is like, I'm still very aware of my abilities as an older adult. So out in the dating world, back to your point about the STDs and what's going on out there, you guys, wrap it up. I mean, it's just that simple, right? Just wrap it up.
Some things don't change.
Yes. We're just going to go all gangbusters because we can. Well, no, you just got to still wrap it up.
Exactly. Just because you can't get pregnant doesn't mean worse things can happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's funny.
To your point too about therapy, that there are good resources that you recommend for those people that might be experiencing those intimacy challenges. Like, are there specific therapists that work strictly just with sexual health with these areas?
There are. And again, whatever local therapists, I would ask those questions because there are intimacy counselors. That's if you're looking for, I think, a more physical relationship. Getting back, because any therapist is going to help you work on your communication. And that is the basis of every good relationship. And I think, kind of to your point about the people who have been in a different, a marriage, you find that second partner. The time that you put together, the time that you build a life builds that intimacy and makes the relationship stronger, I believe, on an emotional level than the physical intimacy. So when you have a situation where you've got any person going for an extreme on the opposite end, I think that might have a little more to say about ego and not wanting to get older than actually a true intimate relationship. You know what I mean?
Is there a misconception about being older? There's a level of mismatched libido syndrome or things that can kind of go in that way. And that's why the choice different age gap situations.
And I will say, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but it definitely popped into my head. The whole, going back to what I said about the nursing homes, that our sexuality is always there. I think the desire is there, even if the physical ability isn't there.
Right.
So it's just one of those things that's ingrained. So if you have an older man with a younger woman, is he really performing on a different level than another man his age? Possibly. Who knows? I would find that hard to believe. But there are lots of books. I have a few books that talk about transforming your sex life as you get older, and just the whole nature of sexuality being innate, pivoting things and things that you can do to make the relationship stronger.
I think fear, maybe I'm wrong on this, but when you are looking at challenges or changes or facing your fears, there certain things can pop up for us as we're getting older, like the embarrassment or the feeling like we're embarrassed or the judgment aspect. We don't want to be judged, right?
Yes.
A girlfriend and I were having a conversation, I think a couple of weeks ago, about this exact thing where a certain situation happened with her husband and she didn't want to talk about it with him because she felt she would be judged. And I'm going, but you've been married for 20 years. Isn't it important to have that conversation though? Why at this stage of the game would you feel that your partner would judge you? And I think that's a legitimate concern. Maybe not so much men. I'd say more women than men. Would you agree with that? I
think so, just because of the dynamics. Men are men, women are women, and we assume those roles. We assume a certain role. And every relationship has, what we would call a dance. You settle into those roles. After so many years, there are times that you're just like, I just don't even want to listen to you. We play that conversation in our head and assume what our partner's going to say back to us. So again, it all comes back down to open communication. But, now it's kind of easy if you think about it, because if there's something that you aren't comfortable saying to your spouse face to face, you can always send a text.
That's true. You got to find a way to say it.
Exactly. Because sometimes when you write something down, it takes the emotion out of things. And this is why journaling is always a really good place to start for probably, the practice of writing it down, even writing a letter to someone. This is the number one thing that you do in therapy to get your feelings out. So on the texting, you just write out the facts. And when you put it all in order to make sense, then it comes across a little bit better. This way, you take your time, write it all out, edit it, make sure your point is getting made clearly, and then that would spark the conversation. And that at least is a little bit better. It's almost like you're in a business meeting and these are my talking points.
Yes, right. I thought about this like years and years ago. I thought, wouldn't it be really cool when you go to the Segzy shop, they have coupons or you can make your own coupons. That's also a way of connecting with your partner. I thought about when we're younger adults and we have children, everybody has, well, maybe not everybody, but some people have a swear jar. So if somebody's caught swearing, you got to put $1 into the jar. Or I thought, wouldn't it be really cool to have a jar on the counter with a notepad beside, and that moment where you're intentionally thinking about your spouse or your partner, you write it down on a piece of paper and put it into the jar. And once a week, you do a random poll, you pull that out and you discuss it, talk about it, do it.
I like it.
And it should be an intimacy element, whether it's physical, emotional, whatever. That way, you're still kind of touching into a form of communication. So it's like if you tell your partner, I like to be touched here, this really kind of does something for me on my neck or my décolletage or whatever. Maybe try that a little more often. So it's okay to suggest things. I think, we're all creatures of habit, and somebody's playbook is the same for 30 years or 20 years. And then you go older and you go, okay, the playbook, we got to change it up. It's not the same anymore. And in order to keep evolving in that emotional, physical connection with your partner, sometimes you do have to go back to that mindset of being 20 where you want to create that lustful environment. Is it taboo that older people aren't expressing themselves that way? Is it a thing? Advice that you could give more people over 50 about intimacy? What's one piece of advice that you would give?
What you're saying, in my opinion, goes back to the playfulness. And as far as things being taboo, what goes on in your empty nest or in your home, there should be no taboo about it. It should just be a fun time. And I love that idea of the jar. And my husband and I will do that. It's always a honey-do list, a foot rub, a back rub, and that keeps it playful. So that's one thing. Also opens communication. And it goes back to that exercise that I put in that document I sent you, that a yes, no, maybe list. Yes. So it's maybe just a rapid fire. Would you rather this or that? And all of these things are gamified communication skills. Mm-hmm. And it starts the conversation.
Remember back when you're in like elementary school or in junior high school, you like a boy and then the note goes around and you write, do you like this person, and circle yes or no? How about couples get back to some of that innocent, childlike play? Because it doesn't always have to be so like cookie cutter. And also there's board games out there that you can purchase that will help with these things. If you're a board person or a card person, I'm not an expert in any of this. I just know that from the outside looking in, I know how I feel now at this age about intimacy and what has changed and how, I got 25 more summers left to go in my life. What's that look like in terms of making those connections?
Yeah.
So in terms of time, you'll ask any one of my family members, my friends, I always refer to everything in summers, because summer is the most playful time we are, the happiest we are, the most vitamin D, all the good stuff we get comes from summer. And you remember all your best childhood memories are in summer. Yeah. Camping and riding your bike till all hours of the day and night and, so on. Time is not borrowed, and you don't know what that looks like. You have right now. Take every little bit that you can and try to use it, even if it's old little trickery things that you did when you were young. Like, why not, right? What do you have to lose? And if your partner is not into it, then that's a different conversation, right? Yeah, you have provided a connection kit, which is your guide to thriving intimacy after 50, which I absolutely love. And to our listeners, Lisa will be putting this up on her website. Her website is www.lisamarienp.com. And basically, it's just a quick read and a guide that'll give you leads to website and tools. If you're uncomfortable going to your doctor, or you don't want to talk about it with, whatever, right? There's a bonus tool in it that has a yes, no, maybe list, which is fabulous. And it does allow you to really talk it out with your partner and touch on physical intimacy, emotional connection, fantasy, adventure, communication and consent, and then notes. And it's a great little tool. She's got additional things in there as well. I also wanted to just say it doesn't have to be taboo. I think that's kind of the point of all of it. As we get kind of ready to wrap up the show, I'm going to finish off by doing a quick speed round with Lisa. Lisa, you get 30 seconds on the clock to answer the first things off the top of your head.
I'm ready.
Now, number 1, what's the last show or movie you binge watched?
The Traitors.
The Traitors. Okay. Coffee, tea, or something stronger?
Coffee.
Morning person or night owl?
Morning.
Okay. Books or movies?
Audiobooks.
Okay. And what's your go-to comfort food?
Pasta.
Pasta. Ooh. Just think of the Lady and the Tramp moment. Replay it. Do it, right? Let's get that intimacy going. So for any of our listeners out there, Lisa, is there any final thing that you just kind of would like to leave on the table for them? And then just in regards to suggestions or something off the top of your head?
Open communication. It's never too late. You're never too old. Play and have fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Get into that pickleball court and then go have a dinner and create some romance. Why not?
Exactly. Go to a cooking class.
Yeah.
Learn another language together.
Right.
Go to a baseball game.
You want to do the Demi Moore, Patrick Swayze when they do the clay. Get in there and do that. Years ago, my husband and I did one of those paint nights together. And it was quite fun because we each had our own canvas in front of us, but we were splitting it down the middle. So then when we put it together, it's two halves, make a whole.
Oh, that's awesome.
This was probably, I don't even know, 12 years ago when that happened. But anyway, I wanted to say that's all for today's episode of If Margaritas Could Talk. And I'd like to thank you, Lisamarie, for joining us today.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. And do not forget to join us next week as Kira and I discuss to wax or not to wax. That is the question. And if you have something to add, please drop a comment or send us a message. We'd love to hear from you. I hope today that all of our listeners, young and old, whoever you are out there in the world, that you perhaps just remember that age is just a number. So until next time, keep laughing, keep living, and remember, if life gives you lemons, you make a margarita. Please follow, like, or buy us a coffee on your favorite listening platform. We can also be found at ifmargaritascouldstalk.com, Podcast Diva. I'd like to say cheers, everybody, and cheers to you, Lisa. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye now.